The two ladies were lost in the moment. All the longing and tension that had lingered between them finally met in a single heated instant. The room was thick with desire, the air heavy, electric, as if every breath they took was in sync. Their bodies were so close that the world outside the room ceased to exist. It was just them, together, in this stolen moment. But then the door creaked. Before either of them could react, the door burst open and Ama's mother stood in the doorway. Her eyes were wide with shock, her face frozen in a look of disbelief. She gasped, her voice trembling in both horror and anger. "Oh my God, what are you people doing?" Ama sprang to her feet on the bed, her heart racing, her mind unable to process the situation. She was caught, exposed, in the very moment she tried to keep hidden. Akosua, equally startled, jumped up, scrambling for her clothes. She grabbed them hastily, her fingers trembling, and made her way to the door with the swift grace of someone who knew there was no turning back. Ama's mother took a step forward, eyes still fixed on her daughter, her voice a sharp, piercing scream that echoed in the room. "Ama!" Those were the last words Ama remembered hearing before the slipper flew, slapping her across the face with the force of her mother's rage. The next day, Ama found herself sitting in the middle of a tense family gathering. The room was heavy with the presence of her extended family, her mother's side. Her father had been absent since she was 5, and his absence was like a shadow in the corner of her mind. But today, his absence felt even more pronounced. The weight of the moment, of the guilt that seemed to hang in the air, made everything feel suffocating. Her grandmother, Pogna, was the first to speak, her voice a booming command that cut through the silence. "Deria, I warned you," she began, her voice cold and judgmental. "I told you the dangers of neglecting our custom. Do you see now what I was telling you? A lady's desires must be tamed when she's young. Look at this shameful thing she has done." Ama's mother, Deria, sat beside her, her face blotchy and tear-streaked. Her body trembled, her shoulders shaking from the weight of her own guilt. "Mommy," she said softly, barely above a whisper, "I really didn't think it would come to this." Her voice cracked with sorrow and regret, as if she couldn't believe what had happened. She had never imagined that her daughter would find herself in this situation. "It's not too late," Pogna continued, her tone now more urgent. "We can still do something about it. We can still perform it on her." Ama's head spun at the mention of it. She had been sitting on the floor, her body racked with sobs, her heart breaking under the weight of what had just transpired. The words barely registered at first, but then they hit her with the full force of their meaning. She looked up, her eyes wide, searching between her mother and grandmother, confusion clouding her vision. "Perform what?" she murmured, her voice barely audible as she tried to grasp what was happening. "What do you mean?" Her grandmother's gaze hardened, and she leaned forward, her words as cold and final as stone. "We will remove that thing that is making you have impure desires. Desires you are only supposed to reserve for your future husband." Ama's heart heaved in her chest, panic rising with every passing second. "I don't understand," she said, her voice shaking. "Remove what? No, you can't do that. I am not a kid. I can't undergo that. Mommy!" Tears streamed down her face, mixing with the frustration and disbelief that overwhelmed her. She couldn't believe this was happening, couldn't understand why her mother, her family, thought this was the solution. The pain of her heartache, the love she felt for Akosua, and the utter betrayal of her own body felt like too much to bear. Her grandmother's eyes were hard as stone, as if she had already made up her mind. "It's the only way, Deria. Pogna said, her voice unyielding. She has to be cleansed, or her desires will only lead her astray. Daria, who had been quietly crying, now wiped her tears away with a trembling hand. It's tradition, Amma, she said softly, almost apologetically. I didn't want it to come to this, but you've crossed a line. This is the only way to fix what's been broken. Amma's head spun. Fix? Her voice cracked as she let out a bitter laugh, full of anger and disbelief. You think this will fix anything? You think I can just forget what I feel just because of some stupid tradition? Her words were like daggers in the room, sharp and bitter. But her grandmother only shook her head, her eyes filled with a stern resolve. You may not understand now, but you will. This is what must be done to save you, to keep you pure. It's for your own good, child. Amma's breath caught in her throat as she fought to hold back the flood of emotions threatening to spill over. The room felt like it was closing in on her, the walls pressing in, suffocating her. She had never felt so powerless, so completely out of control. Her own body, her own desires were being treated like something to be purged, something to be erased. I won't do it, she whispered, barely able to breathe, her voice shaking with defiance. I won't let you do that to me. But as the words left her mouth, she knew she was alone. No one would listen to her. No one cared about her pain, only their customs, their expectations. Amma couldn't remember the details clearly. Everything felt like fragments of a dream. No, a nightmare. The kind that twisted and turned in on itself, blurring reality and illusion. She remembered struggling to sleep, tossing and turning in discomfort. And then her mother would come, pressing warm food to her lips, murmuring soft words, pretending to care. But behind her, looming over her like a dark shadow, was her grandmother, Pogna. Her wrinkled face stretched into a tight, knowing smile, a smile that made Amma's skin crawl, even in her half-conscious state. Then there were the chants, low, rhythmic, unsettling. Amma remembered faintly seeing Pogna dressed differently, her clothes draped around her in a ceremonial way. The older woman knelt beside Amma's bed, holding something in her hands. There were others, women standing by, their faces shrouded in the dim light. Familiar faces. Amma's heart clenched as the memory surfaced. She had recognized one of them, one of her university lecturers, a woman she had once admired. No, it couldn't have been. The room had felt suffocating, the murmurs of prayers weaving into her consciousness. She had wanted to move, wanted to scream, but her body was sluggish, weighed down as if she was caught between sleep and waking. Then, the pain, a dull, sharp pain that spread through her lower body like a slow-moving fire. It jolted her fully, her eyes shooting open in panic. But before she could react, before she could fully grasp what was happening, a hand came down on her, gentle but firm. A woman, one of the shadowy figures, leaned over and did something to her. And just like that, darkness consumed her again. When Amma woke up, her body was drenched in pain. Not just any pain, a pain that told her something had been taken from her. The room was silent now. Still, the ceremony gone, the women vanished. Only the heavy weight of reality remained. For a long moment, she lay there, staring at the ceiling, her breaths coming out in ragged, shallow gasps. She felt numb, and yet every part of her body screamed in agony. Then, a deep, gut-wrenching sense of dread filled her. Her trembling hands moved beneath her skirt. The moment her fingers brushed against her skirt, she knew. She let out a broken, strangled cry as she jerked her hands away, staring at them as if they would reveal something different, something that wasn't true. But the evidence was there. They had done it. A guttural scream tore from her throat. "What have you done?" she wailed, her voice hoarse, rising into an anguished shriek. She thrashed, ignoring the burning pain that lanced through her body. "What have you done to me?" Footsteps rushed toward the door. The door swung open. Daria stood there, completely calm, as if the sight of her daughter breaking apart meant nothing. "Oh, you are awake," she said in a flat, almost bored voice. Amma gaped at her, her face contorted in disbelief. Her mother's tone, the complete lack of remorse. Amma sat up, ignoring the fire raging between her legs, ignoring the dizziness. "How could you do this?" she choked out, her voice raw with horror and betrayal. Daria stepped inside, sighing as she settled beside her daughter, as if this was just another ordinary conversation. "Amma, calm down." Amma shoved her hand away, flinching at her touch as if it burned. "I hate you," she spat, her voice venomous, shaking. "I hate you so much." Daria sighed, unmoved, like she had been expecting this reaction. "I did it for your best interest, my daughter." Amma let out a harsh, bitter laugh, wild and unhinged. "My best interest?" she shouted. "You won't understand it," Daria continued, her tone eerily gentle, as if she was explaining a life lesson. "Just like I didn't understand it when it was done to me at 5. Amma froze. 5. Daria's face was unreadable as she continued. "But it helped me growing up. When other ladies were messing themselves up, I was able to control mine until I met your father. He was the one who took it." Amma shook her head violently, her breath coming in quick, panicked gasps. She didn't want to hear this. She didn't care about her mother's past. Daria tilted her head, watching her daughter closely. "Tell me, Amma, what do you think your future husband would say if he knew you had offered it to someone else?" Her voice dropped, her tone turning sharper, "Much more to a fellow woman like you." Amma stared at her, her heart cracking into pieces. She couldn't believe it. She wanted to wake up. She wanted this to be a nightmare. Her hands fisted in the sheets, her body trembling uncontrollably. "It will take a few days to heal, but you'll be fine," Daria said in the same calm, detached voice, as if Amma's devastation meant nothing. Amma let out a broken sob. Daria placed a hand on her shoulder. "Trust me, when you have daughters of your own, you will understand and you will do the same." Amma jerked away from her touch, shaking her head furiously. "You can hate me," Daria said, sighing, standing up, "just like I hated my own mother, until I saw you with that demon you call a friend." Amma's body went still. "Akosua." Daria's lips curled in a twisted smile, one that didn't quite reach her eyes. "The lady that you were frolicking with, where was she when you got caught?" Amma's stomach lurched. "She ran away like a chicken, didn't she?" Daria let out a low, mocking laugh. Amma swallowed hard, her heart twisting painfully. "She didn't run," she whispered, her voice weak. She was just scared." Daria raised an eyebrow. "Oh, then check your phone." Amma froze. Her mother gestured lazily toward the bedside table. "You know I don't have your password. See if she's called you since that night." Amma stared at the phone. She didn't want to check it. She didn't want to confirm what she already feared. Her breath hitched as she grabbed the device with shaking hands, unlocking it as dread pulled in her stomach. The screen lit up. No messages, no calls, nothing. Amma's throat closed, her vision blurring with fresh tears. Daria sighed, watching her daughter's reaction with cold amusement. "You left me unconscious," Amma suddenly snapped, her voice filled with anguish. Daria shrugged. "Yes, to numb the pain." She paused, then smiled as if she were speaking to a foolish child. "But that's beside the point." Amma clenched her fists. "The point is, you made a mistake." Daria continued, her tone eerily patient. "I made a mistake too, but now we've corrected that mistake." Amma stared at her mother, feeling a new kind of hatred bloom inside her. "We can try to move forward now," Deria finished, turning toward the door. Amma let out a broken sob, burying her face in her hands. Deria hesitated briefly at the doorway. "You'll be fine." Weeks had passed, and Amma was yet to hear from Akosua. At first, she convinced herself that Akosua was just busy, that she would reach out soon. But as the days passed, as the seasons shifted, silence became her only companion. One evening, unable to bear it any longer, Amma sat on the edge of her bed, gripping her phone tightly. Her heart pounded as she scrolled through their last conversation. The words now felt like echoes from another lifetime. She took a deep breath and dialed the number. "The number you have dialed is not available at the moment." Amma frowned. She tried again. Same response. Maybe there was a mistake. But when she tried sending a message, it failed to deliver. The weight of realization settled on her chest like a rock. Had she been blocked? Her hands trembled as she tried again, desperately hoping for a different outcome. But the response never changed. Her vision blurred. The lump in her throat grew thicker. She had been abandoned, left behind with nothing but memories. She refused to cry. Not this time. Instead, she threw her phone onto the bed, exhaling shakily. If this was how it was going to be, then so be it. Amma's world became smaller. Most days, she wandered into the garden, sitting on their old meeting bench, watching the leaves rustle in the wind, foolishly hoping that one day Akosua would appear. She never did. Other days, she locked herself in her room, barely speaking to anyone except for Suta and Pokua, her childhood friends. They were the only ones who could still reach her. "You can't keep doing this, Amma," Suta said one afternoon, watching her push the washi around her plate. "She's gone. You have to move on." Amma forced a dry chuckle. "Move on to what?" Pokua sighed, her voice gentle but firm. "To yourself. You don't need her to keep living." Amma said nothing. She had also refused to eat her mother's food for months now, not only out of defiance, but because everything tasted the same. Empty. Her mother never asked, never forced her. She simply left the food on the table, night after night, waiting for the day her daughter would sit down and eat again. That day never came. Years passed, and life had a way of nudging Amma forward, whether she was ready or not. She eventually moved out of her mother's house, finding a job in a quiet countryside town. It was peaceful, the kind of place where the air smelled like fresh earth after rain, where the nights were filled with the sound of crickets instead of car horns. She liked it here. It was during this time that she met Kwabena. It happened in the most unremarkable way. She had gone to the gym with Pokua, more out of boredom than interest, when she noticed him watching her. At first, she ignored it, but it didn't stop. "That man has been staring at you," Pokua whispered, stretching her arms dramatically. "I swear he comes here every day just to see you." Amma took a sip from her water bottle, unimpressed. "So what?" "So what?" Pokua hissed. "He's fine. He's clearly interested. And you, my dear, are single." Amma scoffed. "Men are exhausting." It wasn't long before Kwabena finally approached her. One afternoon, as she wiped sweat from her brow, he appeared beside her, his presence calm but firm. "You seem like you are carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders." Amma froze. That line. Memories of Akosua came rushing back, hitting her like a wave. The way she had looked at her with knowing eyes, the way she had made her feel seen before disappearing without a trace. Amma forced a smile, pushing down the ache that still lingered. "Is that supposed to be a compliment?" Kwabena chuckled. "It's an observation." She expected him to push further, to flirt, to try and impress her, but he didn't. He simply let the silence settle, waiting for her to speak if she wanted to. She didn't, but somehow he kept showing up. She had resisted at first, playing hard to get, shutting down his attempts to get closer, but Kwabena was patient. He never forced his way in. Instead, he just existed beside her, like a quiet, steady force. And somehow, that became comforting. One evening, she told him about her past, about Akosua, about the hurt. He didn't flinch, didn't judge. "It doesn't change anything," he said softly. "I care about you. That's all that matters." Amma had never met a man like him. He didn't demand intimacy. He didn't push her to move on faster than she was ready. He just wanted to make her smile again. For the first time in a long time, Amma began to wonder, maybe I can finally let go. Maybe I deserve this. So one evening, as she sat beside him in his bedroom, listening to him speak about love, something inside her shifted. She leaned in and kissed him. A tear slipped down her cheek as she whispered, "Thank you. Thank you so much." And for the first time, it didn't feel like she was saying goodbye to someone else. She was finally saying hello to herself. That night, Amma stopped by the supermarket to pick up a few supplies. For the first time in years, she felt light. She hummed softly to herself as she walked through the aisles, filling her trolley with essentials. A small smile tugged at her lips as she grabbed a pack of sanitary towels and dropped them into her cart. She was finally getting her life together. She was happy. As she reached for a bottle of body wash, she noticed another woman standing a few steps away, picking up a roll of tissue paper. She barely paid attention, just another shopper, until the woman turned slightly. And then, their eyes met. The moment stretched. The sounds of the supermarket faded. The soft hum of conversations around them disappeared. Amma, Akosua, standing face to face. Neither of them moved. Neither of them spoke. The past, the love, the hurt, everything came rushing back in an instant. Amma felt her fingers tighten around the handle of her trolley. Her breath caught in her throat. And for the first time in years, she felt it all again.